Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to October's episode of our Dóchas webinar and podcast series. My name is Una, and I am the Project Officer at the ISA, and I also sit on the Mental Health and Wellbeing Working Group. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that I am hosting this webinar from the lands of the Camaragal people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you are all watching. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Dóchas will be brought to you on the first Monday of each month, with each session exploring a different aspect of health and well-being. All of our previous episodes can be found on the ISA YouTube and Spotify channel. If you have any questions throughout the conversation, please feel free to pop them into the chat box, but we will also have some time at the end for some questions. So tonight we will be exploring sleep and the unbelievable importance of it. This is actually our second episode looking at sleep, and that's just how important it is. So for some people, you may have had a poor night's sleep and you notice your mood, energy and attention span has completely depleted. Sleep plays a pivotal role in maintaining and promoting good mental health. Sleep is also a cornerstone of good physical health. It serves as the body's natural reset button, allowing the brain to consolidate memories, process emotions, the immune system strengthens, and hormones such as those that regulate appetite and metabolism are balanced. Chronic sleep deprivation can lead to a range of mental and physical health issues. It can also exacerbate existing conditions. Tonight, we are delighted to be joined by Emer McDermott, clinical psychologist, who views sleep as one of our superpowers. Emer, thank you so much for joining us, and I know how passionate you are about this topic. You're very welcome, so thanks for being with us here. Emer, can you tell us why is sleep so important to our physical and mental health?
Well, I suppose we'll all know when we've had a bad night's sleep, the impact that it will have. But I suppose in general, kind of thinking about our body needing it for like physical repair and recovery, in terms of, I suppose, our cardiac functioning, so our heart, our metabolism, like you've already mentioned, in terms of our learning, concentration, attention, in terms of that memory piece, so processing what's gone on during the day, and storing it, and also I suppose the impact on our mood and our energy levels. So kind of has an overall impact on probably every aspect of our physical and mental well-being. And really, if we're not getting enough sleep, that's when we really start to notice actually the impact that it does have. Whether that's on our energy levels, in terms of regulating our mood, our anxiety tends to kind of heighten. We're not able to concentrate or focus on kind of tasks during the day. And generally, that kind of overall fatigue that we might have. And also, I suppose, those long-term conditions that we might have in terms of obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and I suppose the impact then on our mental health. And I suppose just with any of those, it is also kind of thinking about what causes one or the other. So sometimes you may have a medical condition that actually impacts on your sleep, but also it can be as a result of your sleep being deprived or really poor for an extended period of time that actually starts to have a knock-on impact on our physical and mental well-being. So it's kind of that chicken and the egg.
And I think it's something that for people who don't have any issues with sleep, it's almost something that we take for granted a little bit. We don't, it's only when we're not getting a good night's sleep that we realize how much it can badly impact on us. And I know for myself, it can only take one night of not sleeping well for you to notice the impact that it's having on focus, energy, mood. You know, it's quite, seems to be quite instantaneous, the effects of it.
And those are, you know, just those kind of short term, like of one night of bad sleep. Whereas if you think about that extended period of like, if you're not getting a good enough night's sleep over weeks, months, actually the impact that that would have on your body, and also I suppose on your brain. Whereas one night's sleep, we generally will kind of catch up on that. But yet you will notice during the day that you might be that bit more irritable, cranky, not able to kind of manage your emotions in the same way. We won't be able to focus at meetings or tasks that we might be doing, or even just processing it. Like if somebody's telling us something or asking us for something, we just won't be as sharp as what we would normally be if we have generally a good night's sleep.
And I think when people, you know, when you hear people say, you know, well, I didn't really get a good night's sleep last night, I think there needs to be a little bit more validation for how, of course, I can understand then maybe why you're not feeling so well, or, I think there needs to be more gravity given towards what this is actually doing for us. Same as if you say, I've, got a headache or I've got a sore tummy. If someone says, look, I haven't slept well last night, like, let's acknowledge that that's a genuine reason for not feeling well.
Oh, absolutely. And in terms of the expectations that we have of somebody when they haven't had a good night's sleep,
Yes.
Whereas exactly as you said, if somebody says, God, I have a migraine or have a headache or, have a tummy ache or something, it's like, oh, you poor thing. Do you want to go home, or are you going to be able to manage? Whereas if you've kind of had a bad night's sleep, it's just struggle on.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Can you talk us through, I suppose, the spectrum? Because obviously there's the 1 to 2 nights of sleeplessness, and that might be based on, a significant event that has happened, or particular stressors. But then obviously, it sort of steps up and up until you get to the sort of sleeplessness conditions and the insomnias. Can you help us understand what that looks like, and when does it start to become a chronic sort of condition for someone?
I suppose it nearly all comes down to what has happened to begin with. So exactly as you said, if there's some particular stressor, if there's something coming up at work or something happening in your personal life or relationships or ill health, all of those things will impact on your sleep, in terms of your stress levels, kind of worrying thoughts, those pieces. And generally, you might have a couple of nights where maybe you've disrupted sleep, but you're probably still getting a bit of sleep at some stage. And once the event has passed, or whatever that stressor might be, has kind of reduced, generally you will fall back into a normal routine with your sleep. But it's where it becomes kind of persistent and consistent, where it doesn't mean that every single night you have to have a bad night's sleep. It just means generally like 3 or 4 nights for a couple of weeks, up to like starting to be like months, where your sleep is really disrupted. So generally that would lead then to like an insomnia diagnosis. So it has to be kind of persistent for quite a period of time, where you've difficulty either falling asleep, maintaining sleep, or waking up really, really early. And you kind of have to, it's that quality and quantity of sleep that you have to be looking at for people. And it is over a prolonged period of time that's when you're kind of looking at getting a diagnosis. But I suppose also there are lots of other diagnoses that might contribute. So whether, or not necessarily contribute, but also might be happening in terms of like narcolepsy, which is kind of nearly daytime sleepiness, or like sleep apnea, which again is kind of related to obesity as well. All of those things kind of have an interplay. So it's looking at what else might be going on alongside the insomnia, because with like a mental health diagnosis, you will also have symptoms in relation to your sleep. So it'll either be too little or too much, where you're having excessive sleep. Again, similar with anxiety. And sometimes it's looking at, well, actually, if we treat the cause, that will have a positive impact on your sleep as well. So it's really hard. And I think that is the frustrating piece with sleep difficulties, is it's not a kind of, one simple solution that's going to work for everybody. It's trying to unpick what's happening for that particular person. Is it a one-off kind of situation, or is this something more long-standing, and what is happening that is impacting on their sleep? Because, as you said, if you have not had a good night's sleep, and even one night, you will really feel the impact of it. So if that is happening to you on a weekly basis, you do feel like you're losing your mind. And you kind of are losing your mind, because it is not getting what it needs. It is not getting that beneficial sleep. So you're starting to kind of think about, like, oh my God, like, is this ever going to change?
I know that you've touched on a few kind of causes of sleeplessness, and I know that there are a vast amount of sort of, causations or medical issues. Obviously, there's certain things that are within our control, and then there might be certain things that are outside of our control. For the things that are within our control, what are some of the sort of starter things that we could be looking at in terms of, you mentioned routine there. I know we all might have good intentions for integrating healthy habits. But, just to give an indication of what are some of the beginning things that we could look at.
I suppose, like, the thing that we all don't want to talk about, but or acknowledge, is that in terms of, caffeine, alcohol, those pieces that impact using our phones, using screens before bed, those are really those lifestyle pieces. Shift work, kind of your kind of sleep routine at the weekends, depending on what you're up to, could be completely throwing you off. If you're out till 3 or 4 a.m. and then you're sleeping in till midday, and then you're trying to fall asleep on a Sunday evening for a big day of work on Monday, your sleep cycle is all over the place. So really trying to kind of pull it back and think about that routine. So what I mean by that is thinking about like, bed is for sleep only, and for sex, that is it. Now, I say these things, and again, knowing that for some people, they can use their phone, they can put it down beside them, and they can fall well and truly into a deep sleep. It's for people that are finding it difficult. You need to pull everything back and really think about, okay, what can I potentially add back in when I've started to have a good night's sleep? So really thinking about, okay, bed is just for sleeping. The one thing that I would say has a really positive impact is getting up at the same time every morning. And that is so hard, because again, at the weekends, if somebody's getting up at 6 a.m. during the week, they generally probably may not want to get up at 6 a.m. During the weekend. But it really throws off that balance of kind of trying to get a good night's sleep. If you're then shifting it to not getting out of the bed till 10, but wanting to go to bed at the same time, or trying to get back into that routine on a Sunday night, it just throws off balance.
I find that the body is so tuned to when you're waking up. So even when I want to sleep in on the weekend, I can't, because my body has learned that early morning get up. So your body is so intuitive, isn't it? So intuitive. It can learn habits very quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have that is that circadian rhythm that we have. So it's an inbuilt body clock that we have, and we crave routine. Even if we don't want it, we crave it. So the more that we can give it, and that just means that potentially, if you are getting up at 6 a.m., like, try and get up by 7 if you really want to have a bit of a lie-in, but not really shifting it where you're really sleeping in by day. Trying to not nap if possible. And again, I say that being, if you really need to nap, take a nap, but try and keep it to 20 minutes, put an alarm on, and then physically get up and maybe go for a short walk or something like that. But again, if possible, what you're trying to get is that like sleep drive, that appetite for sleep in the evening. So the longer that you can stay awake and you're getting so tired, all you want to do is close your eyes, that's what you're looking to get. So that if you have a nap, that actually disrupts that. So again, trying to pull back on those things. The other piece is, which people find hard as well and completely understandable, is if you don't fall asleep within 15, 20 minutes, get out of the bed. So get up, do not use your phone, do not use the TV, laptop screens, things like that. But get up and just fold the laundry, look at a magazine. I don't even know if anybody has magazines anymore, but like a book or something, leave it in the sitting room, and sit there until you find that you're falling asleep again, and then get up and go back to bed, so that you're retraining your body that actually bed is only for sleep. It is not for me tossing and turning and thinking about the day ahead or thinking about how much more sleep I'm going to get. And we are all guilty if we have a phone near us or a clock or anything like that. If you're having difficulties and you notice that you're waking up in the middle of the night, remove them from the room. If you can't remove them completely from the room, put them so far away from you that you don't wake up. Because what I hear a lot with clients that I work with is they will tell me that they religiously wake up at like 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And I'm like, how do you know that you wake up at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m.? And it's like, oh, well, I just tap my phone. Like, I don't use it, but I tap my phone, or I have a clock. And unfortunately, again, it is our body has then become so attuned to, I only get maybe 3 hours sleep, then I wake up. And then I stay awake for an hour or two, and then I fall back to sleep. So we're in those habits without even realizing what we're doing. So trying to remove them if possible.
And that piece, even about, if you're lying in the bed and, you're not falling asleep and you're tossing and turning, it almost seems a little bit counterintuitive to get out of the bed, because my fear would be, oh, but then it's going to wake me up even more. And then it's going to be even harder to go back to sleep when I return to the bed. So I just kind of tend to stick it out. I'm like, it'll happen, it'll come, I'll fall asleep soon. So, I can understand it now from what you've said, but my fear would be that it would kind of like wake me up more.
But I suppose if you're tossing and turning in the bed, you are actually waking yourself up. You are making yourself more anxious. You starting to count down, how many more hours do I have? If I fall asleep now, what's going to happen? It's like, oh, now I'm awake for the night. Instead, you just embrace it. If I'm awake, I'm just going to get up and I'm going to move to the other room. And I'm only going to come back when I'm kind of sleepy or after a period of time where you're like, I'll give it another go. And then I will see. What you're trying to do is shift it so that if for some reason you wake up at 4 a.m. and you're like, I am wide awake and I'm not falling back to sleep, that you try and persevere as much as you can then through the day. If you do have to have a tiny nap, it's like before 12 if possible. But what you're trying then is come the following night, you are so tired and that appetite for sleep is there that you've actually reset.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And I know that sounds hard, but what will happen, unfortunately, is whatever might be causing us to wake up and kind of rethink the world or solve the world's problems or whatever, or it may be some sort of anxiety that we have that is causing us to wake up in the middle of the night. And it's like, oh my God, I'm worrying about this particular thing. But a lot of the time, what happens is if we continuously wake up, or it's happening repeatedly, we then start to get like a sleep anxiety. So it's anxiety relating to going to sleep. It's like, oh my God, if I wake up in the middle of the night tonight now, I have a big day tomorrow. I'm just not going to be able to function. I'm not going to be at my best. I have that meeting that I have to do. Like, it's just going to be the worst night's sleep ever. Like, you're asking to not sleep.
Yeah.
Because you're making yourself more awake than, again, trying to relax and unwind and really, you're getting your body as physically relaxed as it can in terms of the muscles, and also kind of easing your thoughts so that your brain is not becoming more and more alert as you're going to bed. And the same with if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, okay, I'll try and persevere. And that's fine if you just wake up and you're like, oh, I'm awake. I'll give it a go. I'll try and fall back to sleep. But if you're persisting and you're tossing and turning and you're starting to get kind of, beating yourself up,
yes,
then it's
yes.
Get out of the bed.
Yes. What are your thoughts on the impact of alcohol on our sleep?
it's a disaster, in short. And I don't mean that, like, again, in all of these things, we have to live,
Yeah.
okay? But you just need to be aware that actually it really negatively impacts on your sleep. So it causes that disrupted sleep. So what it will do is help us to kind of nearly pass out, but generally you will wake up and have a disrupted sleep throughout the night, or you might wake up then at 3 a.m. and that's when you're generally like wide awake. And I've heard of a lot of people who actually wake up then and have another drink to actually put them back to sleep, because that's how their body learns to sleep.
Okay.
But you don't get the quality of sleep that you would get if you actually naturally fall asleep and you have that wind down before bed.
Okay.
And I know we've all heard, like, if somebody will say, well, just have a little drink before you go to bed, it will ease the nerves, or if you have something coming up, it really doesn't work. So just be mindful of that. But I know that, like, people drink alcohol. And again, some people will drink it and it will not have what they would associate a negative impact on their sleep. And that's fine. This is for people, I suppose, that they are finding it difficult. They are not getting the quality of sleep that they need to function by day. Versus somebody who's like, I can, stay out till 4 a.m. and I'm fine on a Sunday night, and I can use my phone and I can drink alcohol. It's not for those people who can just switch it off and fall asleep. It is for somebody who's actually finding it difficult and it's really impacting on their quality of life.
Sure. And Emer, I'm aware that there might be people listening to this episode who, again, are on that kind of spectrum. There might be some who are, just slightly struggling, and it's affecting a bit of their day to day. And then there might be some who are, really kind of in the depths of despair with lack of sleep. Can you help us understand what are some of the things that we can do, especially when it comes to, and I know I've been very guilty of this, is that element of the anxiety in the bed with the thoughts. And I know that I myself have tried a little bit of challenging with those thoughts to see if that might help. Can you help us understand a little bit more about some of those techniques that we can look at first before we explore some of the professional assistance options?
Yeah. So with any of those pieces that are coming up, whether it's thinking about going to sleep or what comes up in the middle of the night, I would start writing them down.
Right.
Okay. So what is it that is causing you to, have some sort of sleep disturbance or some anxiety related to sleep? Is it something that's happening tomorrow, something that's happening in your life at the moment? So how do we manage that piece? So just starting to write them down, whether it's like, I think I'm going to get fired, or I don't think I'm going to doing a good enough job, and therefore that's impacting your sleep, which then is impacting on your functioning the following day. Or is it actually, I don't think because of my sleep, I'm really worried that it's impacting on my functioning, it's impacting on my mood, my energy levels, all of those things. Like, what is coming up for you, and getting them out of your head and writing them down. So sometimes even just having a notepad and pen beside your bed, so that if you do wake up and it's like all of these things that you need to be solving in the middle of the night, which generally it's pulling it back and kind of thinking, right, well, I can write down I need to send that email, but do I need to send it at 3 a.m.?
Yes.
It's like, do I need to solve this now? Like, can I solve this now?
Yes.
Or can this wait?
Yes.
And trying to think about, right, is this going to be solved at 3 a.m.?
Yes.
Probably not. So just writing it down. So it's very handy just to have a notepad and pen beside you, but also starting to kind of question, okay, like, where is the evidence for this? So actually thinking about fact. And when I'm kind of working with people, I try and get them to think about, if they're in a court of law, what is the actual facts? Because it might be, well, I feel this might happen, or I think this might happen. It's like, okay, well, how many times has it happened? How many times have you been pulled in by your boss in terms of your performance in work because of potentially your sleep or your functioning? How many times have you messed up at a meeting, or not attended the meeting, or what's actually happened? Whereas
Yes.
a lot of it might be our perception of it. And there may be some fact to it, but then you're kind of thinking about, okay, but potentially I can't change that. But again, a lot of the times if in the evening, say we finish work 5, 6 o'clock, again, hopefully finishing work, not still on emails before you go to bed, to spend a bit of time thinking about like a to-do list for the following day, kind of going through, actually, is there any concerns that I have, but doing it at maybe like 6 o'clock and not just before bed.
Mm-hmm.
So you've given your brain an opportunity to kind of offload, so that offload doesn't happen in the middle of the night when there's nothing else to distract yourself with.
Yeah.
And
From personal experience, sleep, it's so funny because people always say, especially if there's something big going on, or there's a decision to be made, or you need some time, people will always say, well, sleep on it, take the night and sleep on it. And it's funny, I've been lying in bed some nights, and I catastrophize. I'm sort of that person who thinks of absolute worst case scenario. Possible? No, but that'll still where my mind will go, end of the world type of scenarios. And then in the morning, like, hold on, I feel completely different about this now. And it just goes to show you how beautiful a night's sleep is, that it can actually change the way you think about something. It's like, it's that powerful. It has the ability to do that. So and now that I've realized that, I think, oh, hold on, Una, I don't think you're going to feel like this in the morning. So let's just leave it at that. It's wonderful.
And it is, unfortunately, all of those pieces that pop into our head in the middle of the night, we're wondering what is going to happen in these scenarios that you probably, don't even cross your mind. Or even if they do by day, I suppose a lot of it is you're able to rationalize it a lot easier by day, as in, okay, how likely is that to happen? Whereas at night, unfortunately, when we don't have distractions and we're sat there with our thoughts only, we kind of go, yeah, but what if it does happen? And that is that catastrophizing, whereas just being able to pull it back. And as you said, okay, I'll just park this until the morning and then see if this is something that I need to worry about. Then maybe what do I do with it?
Exactly. Okay, so that's one thing that we can do for those people who have a bit of anxiety, or they might be overthinking. We've also spoken a little bit about the sleep hygiene and bed for sleep only, and or for sex. Phones, or minimizing screen time. Think about your caffeine intake. And so those all sound like very easy things that we can integrate into our lives in some way or another, if we're sort of living in a sort of fully functioning home, or we don't share a room with someone in another bed, or that kind of way. What happens then if someone has tried all of these things, given it a really good go, and they're still not getting anywhere?
That's when you're looking to kind of seek further help. So I suppose now people are not getting access to sleeping tablets, those kind of things that they previously would. But I suppose generally it would be going to the GP, because I suppose you're trying to see, is the sleep the issue, or is the sleep a symptom of the issue?
Right.
Okay? And again, it's really hard to unpick, because something else may have started it off as a stressor, and now the sleep has become the stressor. So it's really hard to kind of unpack what it might be. But again, if it is persistent, you need support, because you can't continue like that and just hope that actually it's going to reset itself. If it hasn't, if you really tried and sat down and kind of thought about your routine and what you do before bed, and in terms of time in bed and getting up in the morning, that then you need to be reaching out for kind of support. And that generally is the GP people tend to go to make sure there's nothing else going on. Sometimes people will get prescribed medication or sleeping tablets, but I suppose now the first kind of protocol is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, if people have persistent sleep issues. And they may get prescribed sleeping tablets for a week or max probably 2 weeks alongside that, just to reset if they're really struggling. But generally, they will be looking at the cognitive behavioral therapy. So looking at your thoughts in relation to sleep, your feelings in terms of any emotional aspect, stressors, physical sensations that are coming up in terms of tension in the body, and also what are those behaviors that we're doing that may not be helping us in the long run in terms of our kind of getting a good night's sleep. So that is generally the recommendation that you would get from a GP. So you'd be probably getting a mental health care plan referral if you're kind of eligible for that. But there are some CBT online programs for insomnia, particularly the one by St. Vincent's Hospital. So it's this way up. So they have lots of different programs, but there's a particular one for insomnia as well. It's a 4-week program that you can kind of go through yourself in terms of, you know, actually diarising what's happening and looking at the different factors to see, can you improve that yourself? But if you're really struggling, absolutely reach out. Because it is going to have such a long-term impact, if you know what I mean, in terms of all of the functioning, because your exercise, you know, you're not going to get up and do any of the things that you enjoy doing. We tend to not go to the gym. We won't get up in the morning. We won't socialize because we're just like, I don't have any energy. Like the last thing I want to do in the evening is go out for dinner with friends. Or even in terms of work, it's nearly that dread of having to go in or interact with people. It's like they're all going to know that I haven't slept or I'm not functioning. And if you're doing that persistently for a long time, that in itself is going to have a negative impact on your quality of life as well. So again, it's everything impacting on the other.
So are GPs kind of moving away from medication as much as they can as a treatment option?
Absolutely, yeah. Right. So it would only be like if you really looked at your lifestyle factors and that is not, they cannot find something, then it might be the medication to try and reset, but they would be referring you as well for CBT for insomnia. If it's something that has been going on for a while, or they should be referring you anyway. That's the kind of the treatment recommendations.
And I know also, Emer, especially as expats, we have the experience more frequently of jet lag than maybe other people around the world. And I know for some people the jet lag can hit them quite badly, and I know that is the case in my circumstances. And when I know that I'm going to be traveling, I get some of the the over-the-counter medication, and it works to get me asleep, but I do not like the way it makes me feel. I find I'm very groggy on it the next day. I don't particularly like how it makes me feel. But because I suppose they're unregulated, though, should people be kind of cautious as to how much they're consuming of those?
Like any of those pieces, if you're taking it for a night or you're taking it on a plane or something like that, it's a one-off kind of piece.
Yeah.
But again, if you come back and a week later after you've been on a flight, you're still struggling with your sleep, there's definitely something amiss.
Yes.
And unfortunately, really when the jet lag piece comes in, it is trying as much as possible. I know this is very hard, to try and kind of get on board with the kind of time zone that you're going into. So particularly coming back from Ireland to Australia or wherever you might be, trying to adjust your sleep as much as possible, so you know that you're on that time zone, so not falling asleep on the plane and then coming in and it's nighttime.
Yeah.
As you arrive. So again, as much as possible. But the thing also is when you're getting up early in the morning, so starting the following morning, like if you normally get up at 6, get up at 6. Even if you have taken that day off of work, get up. And if that means your eyes or your eyelids are like heavy, get up, get outside. You need the daylight. So again, that is part of what helps with our kind of regulating our sleep cycle. So we need daylight first thing in the morning, and then kind of shutting off those lights, which is why the phones kind of like lights, TVs, laptops, things like that, actually stop us producing that melatonin in the evening, which is that sleepy hormone that we need. So we need to be really woken up first thing in the morning to really shift out of it, so we're not in that groggy state. And then as much as possible to try and keep ourselves like outside or kept busy, so that the likelihood is if we sit down we might fall asleep. Or if you really need to have a little nap, again, have one early, but really trying to make sure that you set an alarm, because we can easily then just have 3 or 4 hours nap in the middle of the day, and that's a proper sleep then. So it kind of throws us off.
It's funny because you see so many like memes on social media about, oh, napping is life kind of thing. So I think people really rely on naps, and they value their naps.
And that is fine if you can sleep at night.
Okay.
So if you get a nap at 12 o'clock in the day and you're taking your lunch and you're like, I've had my lunch now, I'm gonna have a 20-minute nap, lovely, I'm alert now for the afternoon, that's giving me my little boost, but I'm still in enough of kind of like
sure
a sleep deprived kind of state that by
yes
10 o'clock at night I am ready for my proper sleep. That is fine.
Gotcha.
But not taking a nap at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then expecting to go to bed at 9 or 10.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. And just on the circumstances of, say, for example, you have a partner and you're sharing a bed with them, and one person can drift off to sleep like that as soon as their head touches the pillow, and you think, my goodness, how are they able to fall asleep so quickly? And then the other person is really struggling, and there's tossing and turning, and you're afraid that you might disrupt the other person's sleep. And I mean, what are the options there? Is it just to sort of maybe remove yourself from that bed for a few nights, or?
Yeah, always a difficult one, especially if you're the one tossing and turning, or kind of, especially if you wake up in the middle of the night wanting to kind of smother them with a pillow because they're unconscious and having a great night's sleep. But it's trying to think about, again, if you're not falling asleep and you normally go to bed at like 10 p.m. but you don't fall asleep till midnight, don't go to bed till midnight.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and again, it's something that you could potentially readjust. So if you start to then fall asleep at midnight and your body gets into that routine, you can then start pulling it forward by a half an hour.
Yeah.
But that causes even bigger issues. If you're in the bed and you are not sleeping, you have to get out of it. So do not go to bed until you're sleepy.
Yeah.
So, and again, that is hard. Like if that is something that you're waking up in the middle of the night, again, I would get up. And if your partner is well able to sleep, they probably would nod back off even if you do wake them up.
Yes. Yeah.
So you could probably get up, go to the loo, come back, and they probably won't even notice that you've moved or you've turned on a light or not. And again, it just to reset. So usually if a partner is kind of saying, well, actually, I'd rather you get up and come back 4 or 5 different times rather than tossing and turning and just being really irritated in the bed beside me. And also you're probably going to be a nicer human being the following day.
Yes.
You've had a good night's sleep, so it kind of works in their favor as well.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I guess the one of the reasons that we wanted to do this episode is because we do want people to understand the importance of sleep. And I suppose everyone is generally quite good at making sure they get their exercise a day, or they're sort of clued into maybe some dietary requirements, and then sleep always seems to sort of be down there tailing at the end. So it would be great to see sleep as being seen as one of those kind of essential things. People talk about the 10,000 steps a day and the 5 a day, and I know that the guidelines, is it still around the sort of the 8 hours, Seema?
Yeah, so they say between 7 and 9.
Okay. Ooh,
so if you're, but again, it's if you can have it more consistent. So 7 hours consistently is much better than 9 one night, 6 the next, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I guess for anyone listening to this, depending on where you are on the spectrum, there might be some people listening who, just might be having some recent issues, or there might be some of you listening who have an ongoing problem. It's very important that we acknowledge that we know how difficult that is, and we know that how challenging that can feel. And we acknowledge the seriousness of what you're going through. And Emer, I suppose sort of final messages or final notes on what we'd like to leave people with is, that things can improve. Would you agree?
They can, yeah. And I suppose we all look for the kind of quick fix, and particularly with people who've really been struggling with their sleep, it isn't a quick fix. So it is something that you do kind of have to nearly persevere with for, a week or two, or even, a couple more, but you will start to see the benefits of it when you are really prioritizing that kind of routine, that hygiene around it, in terms of all of the things, whether it's your diet, your exercise, alcohol, smoking, all of those things that happen in the day, and how they actually impact. But I do think it's trying to persist with it. And I know that, again, is so much easier said than done, but it will change. Like, your body needs sleep. But sometimes we develop into those kind of disordered, nearly sleeping patterns, that it's how do we get back out of it. So really trying to make an effort with, okay, what even small changes that I can make, even if it means that I need to seek extra support, is there anything I could be changing just in the short term that might potentially shift it? Because I know a lot of people will, whether you start a diet, whether you start exercise, we kind of go Monday morning, going to do it all. It's never the best time, particularly with your sleep, because it's like, but I need to get a good night's sleep for the week. So generally what I say to people is, can you start maybe on a Wednesday or a Thursday night and really think about, if you can't sleep, like, don't go to bed until it's midnight. If you're generally falling asleep at midnight and can sleep until 5 or 6 o'clock, that's wonderful. Keep doing it that way. So go to bed when you're sleepy, but get up consistently at the same time, and trying not to kind of be out all hours over that particular weekend, and really trying to get like 7 days or 7 nights where you are consistently going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time, even if that means you're only getting 5 hours sleep.
Okay.
But it's consistent. So that kind of quality.
Yeah. And our bodies, they do so much for us, but they're resilient. So once you start sort of integrating some of those patterns and routines, they will come back for you, and they will do what you need them to do, because they want to do it for you. So okay, well, that has been so helpful. Don't think we've any questions from the audience, but if anyone does, please do either pop your microphone on or pop it into the chat for Emer.
Just quickly, Emer, I was really interested to hear about how naps should kind of be limited to 20 minutes. And I was thinking about some cultures that have their siestas and that, and how that's really common. Is there health benefits to naps regularly, like if they make it part of their routine for that 20 minutes?
Absolutely. And again, it's that routine, whereas the expectation that most of us can have a nap in the middle of the day, depending on maybe whether you're working from home or not. But also most of those kind of people that are, or those cultures that are having siestas, they generally go to bed much later in the day. So they're only having dinner at maybe 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And the idea of going to bed, particularly in Australia, is kind of like around 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Whereas in those Mediterranean kind of countries, or depending on where they are, they're probably not going to bed until like midnight.
Yeah.
So it just means that they've worked up enough kind of sleep debt nearly, or kind of that appetite for sleep, that it actually works in their favor. And there's enough time between having food and also going to bed, because you don't want to have a big meal, like a huge big meal, and then try and fall asleep, because you probably will fall asleep, but you will wake up because your body is still trying to function and digest rather than actually kind of reset and repair for the following day.
That's really interesting. I was I feel lucky after listening to this that I rarely have problems with sleep unless it's stress things. So yeah, I was nearly concerned, can you sleep too much?
And you see, again, it is so dependent, because some people can absolutely, they could have 2 hours in the middle of the day, and if they were to go to bed at 9 p.m, they can sleep until 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and there's not a bother on them. But for some people, they're just not able to do that. And it's when we try and compare, particularly when some people are like, oh my God, these people are able to have naps and then they're able to fall asleep, and they're like, I'm not able to even go to bed when it's midnight, and I'm, you know what I mean, I'm still struggling. Those are the people that we're really trying to kind of reset, where naps, then you're sleeping by day and you're not sleeping by night. Yeah. So if you're sleeping by night and you benefit from having a nap in the middle of the day, and you get that little reset, and you've more energy and you're ready to go again, wonderful. But again, it doesn't work for everybody, and that's where it becomes a problem if people are catching up on their sleep debt in the middle of the day and they're not getting it at night.
Brilliant. And just one last question. Is it like a hereditary thing? Like, can it be in your families? Like, my mom always jokes, like, if she went to bed at 10 p.m, she'd wake up at 5 a.m. So her body needs a set amount of hours, and it's actually a disadvantage for her to go to bed early. Whereas she always like says, my dad's side of the family, like, oh, yous are all like him. Yous could just sleep like on demand. Like, I sleep in planes, no problem, without sleeping tablets. Like, I'm very fortunate. Like, is it something, or is it just person by person?
So we all tend to have different kind of times where nearly that sleepiness hits in. So for some people, you will hear that they will be like more alert and they kind of want to do more things the later on, it could be 11 o'clock at night, whereas somebody else is like, dear God, if it's not 10 and I'm not in bed, I'm going to be really feeling the impacts of it. But again, a lot of it is habit. Yeah. So if you're used to, and particularly maybe with your mom, if she's like used to getting up at 6 a.m. or whatever time it might be, she naturally pulls it back. So depending on what time you're normally getting up at, that will probably impact also on what time you need to go to bed at. So there is an element of it is your personality. It's not necessarily completely genetics, but it is certain times we will find that we peak, as in we get more alert in the evenings, whereas other people are very much like that is happening in the middle of the day. And it's just trying to find that balance for people. And generally, it's not a sleep issue per se. We will find what works for us. So again, somebody who falls asleep at midnight will just probably get up at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. Whereas somebody who goes to bed at probably 10 or 9 will probably get up that little bit earlier.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Emer, look, thank you so much. You obviously are very interested in this topic.
I love it.
I'm so happy that you are. I think we need to spread this message far and wide. So well done to you, and I know you're doing great work working with people with all sorts of difficulties. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and some great takeaway tips for people there. I will also put the resources that you mentioned with the CBT, I'll put those in the show notes so people can access them if they so wish. And thank you everyone who joined us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you for our next Dóchas episode in November.